Welcome to Kislev 1, first class on the month of Kislev. Close your eyes. A lot of stuff about sleep and dreams in our tradition. And also another thing that happens when we close our eyes on visualization practice, which is the practice for a month. And you'll see in the practice instructions that I'll send out in a couple of days, the exact practice ties together a lot of the themes we're going to study today, and also Hanukkah, which is really the festival that dominates the whole month. Even though it comes towards the end of the month, the whole month is kind of building towards it, and the tone is set by it. So let's start, as we often do, the Sefer Yetzirah, our oldest work of Jewish mysticism, proto-Kabbalah, technically. And Sefer Yetzirah tells us about our month, as it does for all months, the letter of the month and the astrological sign of the month, and the other characteristics of the month. Let's see what it says. He made the letter Samach, king over sleep. So sleep is the special faculty of our month. And he bound a crown to it, and he combined one with another. And with them he formed Sagittarius in the universe, Kislev in the year, and the stomach in the soul, male and female. So Samach is our letter, sleep is our faculty, Sagittarius is our astrological sign. To be honest, looking through the sources on this month, I didn't actually find very much about Sagittarius. Sometimes there's more material about different themes, but we have a lot of material, a lot of great material on Samach and sleep. So we'll work with what we have. If anyone has any thoughts about how that ties in with Sagittarius, you're very welcome to jump in. You'll see there in the Hebrew that in Hebrew, Sagittarius is keshet, which means the bow, literally. Same word for bow or rainbow. So moving on from Sefer Yetzirah, Rav Sadok Cohen, a great Hasidic master from Poland, someone we refer to very often because he distills a lot of the key ideas of Kabbalah into very clear and psychologically resonant terms. He also teaches a lot about the calendar, rooted in the calendar, especially in this book, Creed Tzaddik. He says, every month has its own work, and as in its own work for us to do in that time, and was created with a particular letter from the 12 simple ones, as is written in Sefer Yetzirah. Samach over sleep, Kislev in the year, and the stomach that soul, in the soul. So just quoting what we just said above, that our month relates to Samach and saying that there are 12 months, normally, not in leap year, and that they relate to the 12 letters of the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, which are called simple in that they are not doubled and they don't have any other complex characteristics. As the Talmud relates, the stomach brings sleep. So just a connection there in tradition already between the part of the body identified as being the most important one in this month, and also the faculty of sleep. So the stomach and sleep relate to each other, and I'm sure you can all relate from your own experience of having had a good meal at some point in your life and being sleepy afterwards. That's just what the Talmud is talking about. The letter Samach refers to the eternal supports all the fallen ones. So we actually saw this teaching from the Talmud before, that in the Ashrei prayer, all of the letters of the alphabet are represented apart from Nun. It's an acrostic, and every letter starts a line apart from letter Nun, which is skipped out. And Nun is the letter of our current month of Cheshvan, and the letter after it is Samach, and Samach begins this line here, Somech Hashem lechol hanoflem, Somech beginning with the Samach. So Samach relates to supporting or raising up. He goes on, the first Samach in the Torah is in the word surrounding, Sovev. Now there in the Torah, in Genesis 2:11, it's talking about a place, a river, and surrounding a place. But he says here, the mystical interpretation of it is that it's referring to, he says, God surrounding everything, and the transcendent light, or the surrounding light, it's called Or Makif, through which God supports all the fallen. So he's tying together here the line that starts with our letter Samach in the Ashrei prayer in Psalm 145, and the first time the word appears in the Torah, and the mystical interpretation of that. So our letter Samach is Sovev, it surrounds everything, and that also relates to it being Somech, to supporting everything and raising up, because God's light is surrounding everything and raising up. And a really beautiful illustration of what he's doing here comes in the next line, and the image, the physical representation of our letter of Samach is a circle. So the circle really beautifully embodies and represents both those ideas of God's light surrounding everything, and also that which supports that which is fallen, that which I would say, because a circle has no floor in it, has no place where, it has no gap in it through which things can fall, or no place in it through which things go down. So it also represents that idea. And he goes on, this is the work of this month, to stubbornly trust that the blessed God will guard and help you, even if you have acted destructively, God forbid. You can fix everything through teshuvah. So how does that relate to what came before? I think he's talking about that perfect circle of the samach being a representation of our attitude, of our, what we might call belief or faith or emunah, or trust, that just as that samach relates to that surrounding light and that surrounding love and that surrounding support from the divine, that we want to find our way this month into a state of, I would say, circular flow. And this is sometimes related in the tradition to the number 8. And as you may know, Hanukkah, the key festival of our month, has 8 nights. And 8 is often said in our tradition to be that which goes beyond the rational. So, for example, the body is perfectly fine as it is for 7 days, but the body of a Jewish male, on the 8th day, we ask for it to be taken beyond nature, beyond the way that God originally made it, to the supernatural, to something beyond explanation, beyond rationality. So Hanukkah is a similar idea. Hanukkah is asking for a certain kind of openness to that which is beyond the rational mind, beyond our usual expectations. And that's often represented by even the way that we draw the number 8 in our regular numbers, and also relates back to the samach and the circle. There are two circles really there in the 8, but interrelating. And there's a beautiful Kabbalistic piece of art called Infinite Eights by David Friedman, if you want to look it up to see that idea illustrated. So Rav Sadok ties together a lot of the ideas there for us, the stomach and the sleep, and the meaning of the samach and how it relates to our month. And I mentioned in audio I left this morning, I'll just say it again quickly now in case anyone didn't catch it, that our current month of Cheshvan, which goes into Kislev, the letter is Nun, as I mentioned before. And when you put Nun and samach together, you get Nes, which is miracle or banner. And that is a key word and a key idea relating to Hanukkah and our month. So it's interesting because we don't make a Nes. The word Nes is not only just the samach, this infinite wondrous thing. It's actually also made from the letter Nun, which has more complex connotations relating to falling and struggling. So it's actually a beautiful teaching built into the word Nes itself, that we need both, that we need Cheshvan and it's struggling and it's falling, and then we also need the samach, and then we can create the Nes from that. Just check the chat. Everyone's good? Good. Do please jump in if you'd like to at any point. Okay, looking at the next source. Looking at my notes actually on the sheet. I think this is important to say before we see the next source. So I said the faculty for the month is sleep. And I started researching for this class just from my own experience and that of people I know that sleep is a big challenge for many of us. And I found a statistic online that the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported in 2015 that 35% of US adults suffer from sleep deprivation. And that is related to a wide array of potentially serious physiological and psychological ailments. I have to say, honestly, I think that 35% might be a very conservative estimate, because just based on the cross-section of people that I know from various ages and walks of life, it seems like this is a very prevalent challenge for many people in many stages of life. So it's something that I think our society is really struggling with. And I think the wisdom of our tradition might help to shine some light on some different ways we can think about sleep and relate to it in terms of our spiritual practice, in terms of our whole person. So the Midrash Genesis Rabbah says, when the Blessed Holy One created the first human, the ministering angels erred. They made a mistake, they erred because of him, and they sought to say before Adam, the first person, holy, meaning holy, 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 meaning you are God, worshipping him. What did the Blessed Holy One do? He caused a deep sleep to fall upon him. Then everyone knew he was human. So I love this story so much. such a beautiful idea that actually we didn't used to sleep, but God made us sleep so that everyone would know, the angels would know that we were human, and that sleep is this human limitation that is placed on us by the divine. And actually, it's a real question. It's one that everybody asks at some point in their life, I'm sure. Why is sleep necessary? Wouldn't we be more efficient as organisms if we never had to sleep, right? And the answer, even coming from a completely non-religious, non-spiritual standpoint, the answer has to be life dictated this need for rest as part of life. Right? For some reason, that's how life evolved, right? And that's how we got as far as we did. Maybe in the future that'll change, but for now, that's where we are. Now, there's this idea in our tradition that sleep is often equated with laziness, with sleeping excessively, with drunkenness, and hence with not studying Torah, not being productive, not living a good life. So we're going to see an example of that here in the next source. And behold, it was very good. This means, behold, sleep is good. But is sleep actually very good? After all, have we not been taught when the wicked drink wine and sleep, it is good for them and good for the world? However, because a person sleeps a little, they are able to get up and toil greatly in Torah study. Meaning, in the end, this source begrudgingly accepts that sleep is good, but only a little sleep. And sleep here is therefore really just a means to an end. I want to say I think that that's a little bit of a shame, because the original teaching of the first two lines is actually that sleep actually is an inherent good in itself. That like I said before, it's something that life decided should be a part of life, and that is therefore has an inherent goodness and an enjoyment to it. And I hope that you have all tasted the sweetness of good sleep at some point. I know what I'm talking about. There's an inherent goodness to it. Just pause there, see if anyone has anything you want to jump in with. Fine. Okay, then looking at another source from the same Midrash from Bereshit Rabbah, Genesis Rabbah. And the Eternal caused the deep sleep to fall upon the human. That's from Genesis 2, it says there. So that's the Tardema is the deep sleep that is to fall upon Adam when God wants to make another person, Eve, out of Adam. Rabbi Yeshua of Sichnin said, in the name of Rabbi Levi, the beginning of a person's downfall is sleep. Now, wait a minute. In the Torah, God makes Adam sleep so that he can make his soulmate, his helpmate, Eve. So that doesn't sound like such a terrible thing. Obviously, he's referring here to the fact that that was then the beginning of the story of them eating the apple and being kicked out of Eden and everything. But nothing would have happened in human history without that. And our Kabbalistic sources say that. They say, really, the whole thing, and not only a Kabbalistic sources, even the Midrash says, the whole thing was a setup and it was meant to be because that's the way God wanted it. So I'm not entirely convinced by that approach. Let's go on and see. When asleep, they do not engage in Torah or work. So we've seen, like I mentioned before, that idea is very prevalent in the early rabbinic sources, that there must have been some people who are wasting a lot of time with sleep, because the rabbis are very strong against that. Rav said there are three types of deep sleep: the deep sleep of sleep, the deep sleep of prophecy, and the deep sleep of a trance. So that's pretty interesting. So you can be just asleep, or you can be asleep actually in communication with the divine, or you can be asleep and in some kind of altered state of consciousness. Not prophecy, not the same thing, but possibly receiving some other kind of growth or progression. So I think that complexifies the picture a bit more. Sleep is not just a waste of time that you should do as little as possible. There's a possibility of having experience during sleep, even though we're obviously not conscious in the same way we usually are, right? There's a possibility of having experience that may be worthwhile when we're asleep. The rabbi said there is a fourth type, even the deep sleep of foolishness. Okay, I can imagine how that could be, although I'd like to think when I'm asleep, I'm not being foolish per se, but maybe sleep could be part of a foolish lifestyle. How about that? Okay. Rabbi Chanina bar Yitzchak said, there are three withered reflections. This is my attempt to translate novlot. Novlot is like a taste. It's not really. It's sometimes translated as a taste of something, but really, it's a novlot is like the fruit that fell from the tree. So it's and like dried up. So there are three things we have here in this world, which are like a fallen reflection, a pale reflection of something greater. Okay, so a withered reflection of death is sleep. A withered reflection of prophecy is dreaming. A withered reflection of the world to come is Shabbat. So we have sleep, and we have dreaming, and we have Shabbat, and they give us this little hint of these greater things, of things that we can't experience fully here, of death, of prophecy, which obviously some people can experience, but not most of us, and the world to come. Rabbi Avin added two more. A withered reflection of the heavenly light is the sun. A withered reflection of heavenly wisdom is Torah. So sleep there is this taste, or this little hint towards actually death, which doesn't sound very positive at first, but actually, our general approach to death in our tradition is it's not that we we're scared of it, right? It's a transition. It's just something new. There's some mystery around it, some disagreement around it. We don't know exactly what comes next. We don't try and explain it away too neatly, but it's not something that we encourage an overly fearful or negative attitude towards. So I think it ties in both with the sense of wasting time, that we can't be productive when we're dead, and hence when we're asleep, but also the idea of transcendence and a different state of consciousness. So just moving to the next source, from the Talmud in Brachot 60b. This tractate of the Talmud, Brachot, is mostly about prayer. It actually has a lot of material about sleep and dreams in the end, I decided to cut that out of this class just because I've decided a little bit to focus more on quality and less on quantity. But if anyone's curious, I'll be happy to send you it after the class. There's pages and pages of great stories about rabbis having interesting dreams and them being interpreted, all towards the end of that tractate. Here, the rabbis are actually talking about what we do before we go to sleep. They say, one who enters to sleep on their bed recites the first paragraph of the Shema. Then they recite, "Blessed are you who makes the bonds of sleep fall upon my eyes and slumber upon my eyelids, and illuminates the pupil of the eye. May it be your will, O eternal my God, that you make me lie down in peace and give me my portion in your Torah. Accustom me to mitzvot and do not accustom me to transgression. Lead me not into error, nor into iniquity, nor into temptation, nor into disgrace. May the good inclination have dominion over me, and may the evil inclination not have dominion over me. Save me from an evil mishap and evil diseases. Let neither bad dreams nor troubling thoughts disturb me. May my bed be flawless before you, and lighten my eyes in the morning, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Blessed are you, eternal, who gives light to the whole world in his glory." Such a beautiful blessing, part of the bedtime Shema liturgy. So I have a couple of things I'd like to point out about that, but before I do, does anyone else have any thoughts or questions about that or any of the previous sources? Let me ask specifically, what jumps out at you from that last blessing, from the bedtime Shema liturgy? Like what might be surprising there, or that you never noticed before, or what are the dominant themes or ideas that jump out? No? Okay, fine. Well, I will tell you what I think. I was surprised by this piece when I looked at it closely, about how much, even when we're going to sleep, we talk about ourselves as still very much participating in life. I think there's often a sense that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to sleep now. I'm going to switch off. I'm no longer going to be me. I'm no longer going to be responsible. I'm just going to rest, right? I'm going to totally be not here. Actually, this liturgy says, before I go to sleep, I'm asking God to make sure that I still do the right things and don't be led into the bad things, and I still have good dreams and not bad thoughts. And when it says, may my bed be flawless before you, it's a reference to people not having a seminal emission. So, having bodily purity and sexual purity also. And then also, don't let me slip into death. Let me wake up. And then the blessing itself is about illumination, about light, which is an interesting blessing to go to bed with, right? If I'm trying to sleep, what I don't do is turn on a bright light just before I go to sleep, right? That's going to wake me up. But here, just the last few words I'm saying before I go to sleep is reminding myself that actually there is a great light, not the light of my phone, which can wake me up, but the ultimate light, right? Which is something I want to remember before I slip into darkness. So it's interesting, that contrast between, switching off and going into darkness and not being there, and actually in this liturgy, retaining a real consciousness even when we're doing it. We're going to look at how this can manifest in a few different ways in the next section. So again, jump in on the chat or with any thoughts you want to at any point. Otherwise, we'll go to section 2. Isn't life a dream? We're going to see an example from the Torah, from a piece that we always read in Kislev, from Vayetze. So Vayetze Yaakov me Beersheva, Vayelech Harana. So Jacob, our forefather, left Beersheva, and he went towards Haran. And he's running away from his brother Esau is trying to kill him. And it says he encountered the place, Hamakom, and he slept there because the sun set. He took some of the stones of the place, he put them under his head and lay down in that place. He dreamt a ladder was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, and angels of God were going up and down on it. And the Eternal was standing over him, and he said, I am the Eternal, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying, I will give to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Eternal is present in this place, and I did not know it. And he was in awe. He said, How awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. And Jacob awoke early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head, and he set it up as a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. So, relatively famous story, maybe the most famous dream in the Bible, or one of them, right? Jacob's ladder. The mystical commentaries have many beautiful different interpretations of it. The rabbis and Midrash, which we're going to see a little of, also do. The core points for us to be really clear about is that this ladder is set on the ground, as it says, mutzav arza, v'rosho megia hashemayim. So mutzav arza, it's rooted on the ground. Rosho megia hashemayim, it reaches all the way up to the infinite heaven. So somehow it transcends between the material and the spiritual, between the finite and the infinite. And this comes to be a model for everything that Jacob represents and everything that we as his descendants represent. This comes to be his legacy, his contribution to our people in the world. Now, we're going to see some of the Midrashic commentaries which pick up on some of the apparent oddities in the text. First of all, Rashi, our great French medieval commentator, basing himself on earlier teachings as usual, he says, Surely the Eternal is in this place, and I did not know it. He comments on that, for if I had known, I would not have slept in such a holy place as this. So, Jacob wakes up towards the end and says, oh yeah, God is here and I didn't realize. And obviously, Rashi's saying that means if I had known, I wouldn't have gone to sleep. Like, sleeping in the presence of God, that's kind of rude, chutzpahdik, right? That's not something I want to do. So bear that in mind. Now we're going to see another midrash, and we're going to combine it with what Rashi just wrote, and we're going to come to some interesting questions. So the Talmud brings this midrash, Nichud in 91b, It is written, and Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran. And it is written thereafter, he encountered the place, and he slept there because the sun set. When Jacob arrived at Haran, he said, "Is it possible that I passed a place where my fathers prayed and I did not pray there?" When he set his mind to return, the land contracted for him, and he encountered the place. When he had finished praying and he wanted to return on his way, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, "This righteous man came to my lodging place, and he will depart without sleeping over." Immediately the sun set. So this midrash is picking up on the weird way that the first phrase and the first sentence, the whole verse, is phrased. And Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran, which could also mean he went to Haran, right? It could also mean he actually arrived there. But then it says, and he encountered the place, not Haran, some other place, the special place. And he slept there because the sun set. So reading that again more closely with the midrash in mind, I can see what the midrash is working off. But it is all a bit of a weird way to say it. It might have been much more clear to put things in a different order and to make it clear that he got to one place and then another. So midrash is basing itself really well on a tight textual reading, and the midrash wants to tell us that he slept there because the sun set, right? Because the sun immediately set, and the reason the sun immediately set for him was because God wanted him to sleep there. And before that, the midrash wants us to know that the way he arrived at the place was miraculous and actually involved the land folding underneath him to get there. He'd already arrived at Haran, but then he was magically transported by the land back to this specific place where he was meant to be. So the land conspired to bring him back there, and then the sun conspired to go down for him to sleep there. And just contrast that to the previous teaching from Rashi. Rashi said that Jacob thought, when he realized God is in this place, if I had known God was in this place, I would not have slept here. So Jacob thought, quite understandably, that holiness means don't sleep, right? If God is here, like this is, in the tradition, this is sometimes presented as the site of the future temple. If that's the case, if I'm in the Holy of Holies, sleeping is not what I want to do. But the divine actually really wants Jacob to be there at the exact point in time when Jacob is, and Dafka specifically, to go to sleep there. So there's something about sleep and the way we can relate to the world we want to be in sleep that actually creates the possibility for a certain kind of relationship, a certain kind of openness and receptivity, certain kind of vulnerability that Jacob is only capable of in sleep, apparently. And this is really brought out in the story. You know, he puts these rocks around his head to protect him from animals. That's the stones it mentions there in the fourth line. Because he's alone at night in the middle of the desert and he's scared. And lo and behold, what happens is, in his state of openness and receptivity and vulnerability, he's indeed able to receive something very powerful and real. Moving to the next source, it's a Hasidic commentary on this passage from the Kedushas Levi, Levi Yitzchak Abitchev, great master. He says, when Jacob slept, his soul and his thoughts ascended on high, and his soul was attached to the Blessed Holy One, the root of all roots. And this is the meaning of, he took some of the stones of the place, referring to those letters which his thought is composed of. He put them in the place, meaning in the Blessed Holy One, who is called place. And this is the meaning, that he placed them above his head. Because he was asleep, his thoughts ascended into the Blessed Holy One, who is above a person's head. So here, Jacob indeed had a mystical union with the divine, which is not such a big stretch from the Torah's plain meaning of saying he had this vision of God talking to him. And the stones actually represent the letters which in the Kabbalistic tradition are the building blocks of the universe. This actually goes back to the regular non-Kabbalistic midrash too. The rabbis talk about this. The Aleph, Bet, Gimel, the letters of the Hebrew Aleph, Bet, are what the whole universe is made from, and that if we know how to harness them, then we can use them to fix the divine, to fix the universe, to fulfill our potential in the world, and to do tikkun olam in its original meaning, to fix the universe. So Jacob is doing that. He's taking the stones of the place, meaning these ladders, and he's raising them up to the divine, and he's having a relationship with the divine, both directly, says his soul is attached to the divine, and also through these ladders, which he's raising up to their root. And his thoughts specifically, which relate, his thoughts are, his linguistic thoughts made of those ladders, are having that relationship with the divine. So there's an awareness here of different levels of consciousness, that there's like the soul level of relationship, and then there's the level of linguistic thought. And on both levels, he's having a relationship with the divine while he's sleeping. And again, it makes me want to go back to that prayer we saw before about, looking at Brachot 60b again, the bottom of page 3. We ask before we go to bed to have a certain kind of thoughts and certain kind of behavior. We're not just giving up on being who we are normally. And at the same time, it is really important that we just let go and relax, that we really sleep, right? That we really let ourselves actually, let go. At the same time, we're still ourselves, and we still bear some resemblance to who we are. And, in this case of Jacob, this vision, this conversation that happens in his sleep is actually one of the most important things that happened to him in his whole life, and that affects the destiny of him and his family and his people, our people after him for thousands of years. This is it's a very, very important moment. I'm talking, from within the point, the perspective of the Torah. Like, I'm not here to, argue that anything in the Torah should be understood as having literally happened or not having literally happened. But according to the Torah story, this is a defining moment in the lives of millions of people. And it happened while he was asleep. That's fascinating. Just take a sip of my tea there. Feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts or questions. Okay, if not, then let's look at the next source. It's a Hasidic commentary on this verse from Genesis. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter for it, but I have heard it said of you that you understand the dream to interpret it. So Pharaoh famously has a night where his sleep is disturbed by 2 dreams, and Joseph is the only one who can interpret it. So Joseph is pulled out of prison to interpret his dreams. The Meir Shalach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe, very beautifully says in this teaching, every aspect of this world is like a dream that requires interpretation. As a person interprets it, so it will manifest for them. And a person who understands that in every matter, everything originates from God, that everything lives only from what emerges from his mouth, God's mouth, understands the meaning of all things and reaches true life. So Pharaoh says to Joseph, I know that you, Joseph, understand the dream to interpret it. And the Ishbitzer Rebbe is saying, understanding the dream, liftoroto, to interpret it, is the whole game of life. That's what we're all doing all the time. Everything that happens, kol inyanei olam hazeh, everything in this world, hem kachalom hatzarich pitaron, is like a dream that needs interpretation constantly. So everything that's happening to us in our life requires that level of perspective and depth and understanding if we're trying to interpret a dream. When we understand this, when we understand what the ultimate source of everything is, then we can understand the tamach or davar, the meaning or the reason and everything, and we can arrive at true life. I'll let you know when that happens to me. I imagine it's about as accessible as understanding the meaning of every dream that everybody ever has. So it's a high bar and it's a hard bar, but I heard this source taught so beautifully. I've heard Saul Hefter, and he pointed something great out about it. He said, if the world is a dream where everything has to be interpreted, whose dream is it? And the answer he gave actually works on a lot of levels. It's God's dream, right? It's not our dream. We are not the ones who are creating this world. We're not as far as we know, the ones who are creating this world with our dream. It makes me think of that film Inception. Am I living in a simulation that's going on inside my own head? Possibly, but the more kind of straightforward interpretation of this teaching is it's actually God. God is actually dreaming the world. Like it says in this teaching, everything is originating from God, and our job is to try and understand, right? Try and interpret everything that's going on and trace it back to its source.
Also, in one of the early texts that we covered, they say that the dream is related to prophecy, nevuah. That shows how deep dreaming is.
Thank you, Oleg. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Right, that really ties in with that, and also that vision of Jacob is also a form of prophecy, right? Yeah, thank you. Okay, beautiful. So moving on to the conclusion. So already in this section, we're going to move from sleep and dreams to, as it says in the title, dreaming while awake, to visualization practice, which is the practice for our month. And this first source from the Kedushas Levi again is going to help explain what it's doing in this month and how it relates to everything else going on in this month. He says, the general principle is that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, God remembers Israel for good. But only at Hanukkah is that good seen in our consciousness or thoughts. That's just fascinating in itself, this idea that we plant seeds at different points in our calendar, at different points in the year, and those seeds manifest, they come to fruition in different ways at different times. And that a few months after this happens. We see this over and over again in our calendar in different ways. We see how Tu B'Shvat leads to Purim, leads to Pesach, leads to Shavuot, leads to the difficult summer months, leads to Elul. There's like a real beautiful sense of progression through the journey of the seasons. And he's saying there's something about Hanukkah where something good can be seen in our seichel and our machshava, in our consciousness and thoughts, dafka from the work we did a couple of months previously, when we were trying so hard to begin the new year in the best possible way, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Therefore, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is with candles, nerot, which relate to the word for vision, riyah. So candles is the central mitzvah of Hanukkah. It's all about letting them be seen. It's all about the awe, the light, and the riyah, the seeing them. That's the whole point of it. And afterwards is Purim, which relates to speech, for we read the Megillah, and at Pesach, relating to action, we eat the matzah. And therefore, Hanukkah, which is about vision, is in the month of Kislev, whose permutation of the divine name relates to the verse, and when the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw. So in the Kabbalah of the Arizal of Rabbi Isaac Luria, great Kabbalist from Sfat in the 16th century, he says that every month of the calendar relates to a specific verse, and the verse relates to a way of arranging the 4 letters of the divine name. So Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So here, that verse he quoted, if you look at the Hebrew, the first letter of the first word is Vav, and the first letter of the second word is Yud, and the first letter of the third word is Hey, and then another Hey. So that's the letters Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey rearranged in a way that the Arizal says represents how the divine flows into the world in this month, and it relates to sight. This is a verse that is about seeing, and seeing is, as the Kedushas Levi is explaining, is central to Hanukkah and to, therefore, the energy of our month as a whole. So we're going to see a few other sources from our tradition about visualization. And what we're going to see is that although we don't find it very much talked about in most mainstream synagogues and other Jewish communities of practice so much right now, visualization is actually very solidly grounded in our tradition. It's there, as we're going to see. I'm going to see one or two sources here, but you'll see how central and mainstream and important those sources are. There are many other sources which say similar things too. So Sefer HaKuzari from Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is one of the most influential Jewish books of all time. It's a work of popular philosophy, which was vastly popular throughout Jewish history and actually is having a real revival today. It was just translated a few years ago by Dr. Micha Goodman, and it was a bestseller here in Israel. It says, the pious person is nothing but a ruler who is obeyed by their senses and by their mental as well as their physical faculties, which they govern corporally. As it is said, he that rules his spirit is better than he that conquers a city. They direct the organs of thought and imagination, relieving them of all worldly ideas mentioned above, charge their imagination to produce, with the assistance of memory, the most splendid pictures possible, in order to resemble the divine things sought after. For example, the scenes of Sinai, Abraham and Isaac on Moriah, the tabernacle of Moses, the temple service, the presence of God in the temple, and many others. So if we want to be a chassid in the sense of Yehuda Halevi, he's not talking about the chassidim from the 1700s onwards. He's saying you want to be a pious person, somebody who wants to be close to God. You have to rule over your, as he says, your mental and your physical faculties, and to govern them, just like somebody who rules over a territory or a city, as he says. And that means using our imagination to create what we want to create with it. And he suggests making, as he says, the most splendid pictures possible, right? The most wonderful things. And he gives a few very splendid suggestions from the Torah that we might want to recreate for ourselves vividly what happened at Mount Sinai. And the example of Abraham and Isaac on Moriah is quite a challenging one for me personally. But what happened in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, right? What happened in the temple, and so on. So this, I think, in our society where we're used to visual representation, where we're used to being able to just open a screen now and see hopefully well-made video of almost anything being represented very easily, is a little bit different to the world when this source was written, and the world until even 50 years ago, when the world was very different in this regard, and even 10 years ago when screens were not quite so prevalent. Because really at this time when he was writing this, the only visual representations which people were exposed to on any regular basis were grandiose, expensive pieces of art, which often were in places like churches and castles. Art was good art, fine art, which depicted things vividly, was not a mass medium which the masses had easy access to. So people were largely living in a world without a good deal of rich, detailed inspiration in this regard. We see the manuscripts from this period. Many of them did have colorful and vibrant glosses. Occasionally on the very expensive ones, which were contracted by very wealthy families, we see a manuscript with some degree of vividness, of richness of image. But mostly it's more symbolic, and not the kind of image that he's talking about here, of recreating how it actually was, what actually happened, with any kind of sense of realism. So he's asking for something really quite demanding for people. For us, we at least have a reference point. I can imagine, I can imagine the film with the Ten Commandments. I don't think that's actually such a good touchstone for what happened, but at least I can use it as beginning a reference point. And I can certainly imagine other epic scenes from films which I can imagine large numbers of people were doing exciting things, and powerful atmosphere and moving music. And I can imagine a moving scene in my head because I've seen it in the movies. But at the time when he was writing for people to do this, they had no such thing, and he was expecting them, like he says, take charge of their imagination and do that. So it's something for us to consider with our visualization practice, is that we may have it easier in some regard than those who came before us. and how we can use that to our advantage. Now, going back to the Talmud, Rav Chana bar Bizna in the next source says that Rabbi Shimon Chasida said, a person who prays needs to see themselves as if the divine presence is facing them. As it says, I have set the eternal always before me. So the practice here is not strictly just a visualization practice in the narrow sense. It's about how I see myself. The divine presence, the Shekhinah, I have no idea what it looks like. Obviously, nobody does, right? But if I see myself as if that's before me, what does that mean about how I see myself? And what does it mean about how I then feel and relate and my state of presence? That's the request, the advice being made here. It's interpreted in the next source by the Noam Elimelech, great Hasidic master from Poland, Rabbi Elimelech Olezhansk. He said, this is the meaning of I have set the eternal always before me, the same verse there from Psalms, that every Israelite is obligated to visualize the four-lettered name of the divine in front of their eyes. So, in the Talmud, we were talking about an awareness of our feelings, of our presence, of our state of mind before the divine. And through the Kabbalistic tradition, the Hasidim bring this down to a very concrete practice. This is first mentioned by the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, I mentioned before. And the Hasidim really spread a lot of his teachings and practices to the masses. And they say the practice is to visualize the four-lettered name of the divine. And actually, there are sources which say we should try and do that always. That everything we look at constantly, except when we're in the bathroom, we should be trying to see the ultimate source of everything we're seeing is those letters. So we should be trying to connect everything to those letters and see in front of us all the time, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. So that's one possible practice for you to be aware of and maybe try out sometimes in your life and see how it goes. When you're meditating or praying, it's actually something the Degel Machane Ephraim, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, suggests doing specifically when we pray. It says that it's a great way to break the distracting thoughts that we all have when we pray. It's another layer of focus. One way of looking at it is that we're giving the mind something else to do. I'm trying to focus on the meaning of the words, but my mind keeps, going off here and there and distraction and my to-do list and this and that. So give the mind something else to do. Give the mind something else to focus on that's positive and that connects me to the divine, and that will help the whole experience along more. So that works for some people sometimes. Some people need to give their mind less to do, not more, but it depends. Your mind. So you can work it out and play with that. Now, the Noam Elimelech is also going to give us a very beautiful teaching on this next teaching from the Talmud. So we'll read the Talmud first and then we'll see what he says. It says in Brachot, one who was standing in prayer outside of Israel in the diaspora, Nechol, should focus their heart toward the land of Israel. One who is standing in the land of Israel should focus their heart toward Jerusalem. One who is standing in Jerusalem should focus their heart toward the temple. One who is standing in the temple should focus their heart toward the Holy of Holies. One who is standing in the Holy of Holies should focus their heart towards the seat of the ark cover, the dwelling place of God's glory. One who is standing behind the seat of the ark cover should visualize himself as if standing before the ark cover. Consequently, one standing in prayer in the east turns to the west. One standing in the west turns to the east. One standing in the south turns to the north. One standing in the north turns to the face south. All of the people of Israel find themselves focusing their hearts toward one place. So that is the Talmudic basis for the reality we have to this day, that most synagogues face towards the same place, right? Most synagogues face towards Israel, Jerusalem, the temple, the Holy of Holies, right? That's where we are. And if you've ever been to the Western Wall, the closest that we can go most of the time to the temple, you know that even there, people face a certain way when we pray. We're facing towards the Holy of Holies. So that's what we do. Now we'll see what the Noam Elimelech, our great Hasidic master from Poland, says about that teaching. He says, it says in the Talmud, one who is standing in prayer in the diaspora should focus their heart toward the land of Israel. One who is standing in the land of Israel should focus their heart toward Jerusalem, and so on. And it emerges from this that all the prayers of Israel go through the same gate. So this is an idea we have earlier in our tradition too, that part of what's happening when we all pray towards that place is that all of our prayers are going through it. And it emerges from this that a person who wants their prayers to be heard needs to intend as if they are praying in the land of Israel, and the built temple and the altar are erected correctly and in its rightful place. And behold, if they are like one currently residing in the land of Israel, and behold, they are like one residing currently in the land of Israel, and through this they come to clarity and complete union with the divine, praying with total concentration, with awe and with love, as if they are standing in the Holy of Holies. At the time of prayer, they need to draw in their thoughts that they really are in the land of Israel and the temple, and see everything with their sense of sight. So he gets more and more explicit about the practice as it goes on, until there's really no doubt about what he's talking about. So first of all, okay, our prayers go through the same gate. Then it says, okay, we need to intend as if we're in Israel and in the temple, and we're there, and then we can get to union with the divine. Great. But then he really spells out in the last few lines, right? Somebody needs to literally draw in their thoughts, to paint, to make it very clear their thoughts, where they are and what they are experiencing. And they actually have to experience it with that sense of sight. So very, very clear instructions for us that when we're praying, we have the opportunity not just to be saying the words and for whatever to be happening through the words to be happening, that's great, but also to be creating a multi-sensory experience for ourselves with where we see ourselves and what do we smell around us and what do we hear around us. That is all ours for imaginative control. Like it said in the Kuzari, we are in charge of our senses. We are in charge of our faculties. We can choose what to do with that. And that can be part of the experience of prayer. And there's a creativity to prayer and aliveness to prayer. It's not just something which is supposed to passively happen to us, that, you know, somebody is just born being good at it and it just happens. It's like, if I actually want to follow this kind of instruction, it takes months to work on. It takes working on it every day, you know, as consistently as we can, or, you know, several times a week, whatever it is, but certainly more than just once a week if we're going to really affect the neural circuits and the nervous system for a good amount of time, enough time to really make an impact, again, on my brain, on my mind, and on how it relates to my body, and gradually getting better at it. I can say myself, visualization was not something that came very naturally or easy to me when I first started practicing it, but months and months and months of practice yields results, just like going to the gym. It's just a muscle, which the more we use it, just like any other muscle, gets better. So that's the invitation of these practices. And we're going to see one final teaching from the Gemara, from the Talmud, which suggests how deep visualization can go, that it's not only a device for connecting with the divine through prayer, it's actually a device, a technique we can use to guide us through life in a really skillful way. So this passage is talking about where Joseph is working in the house of Potiphar, and Mrs. Potiphar is like Mrs. Robinson. She wants to seduce Joseph. She's saying, come lie with me. And in this scene that the Talmud is commenting on, she's grabbed Joseph by his clothes and she's seducing him very aggressively. And, you know, he wavers, he almost gives in to her. And the Talmud says, at that moment, his father's image came and appeared to him in the window, the father of Joseph, who is Jacob, Yaakov. The image said to him, Joseph, the names of your brothers are destined to be written on the stones of the ephod. The ephod is an item of clothing, an apron worn by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, in the Mishkan, tabernacle, and in the temple. And on the ephod, there's a special holy stone relating to each of the 12 tribes. And as it says here, you are to be included among them. So there's going to be 12 stones for the 12 tribes. And Joseph is going to be represented among those 12 tribes. Actually, 2 of his sons will be counted among the 12 tribes. And as Jacob, the vision of Jacob says to Joseph, do you desire your name to be erased from among them? So what's happening? Joseph is at this critical turning point in his life. If he gives in to being seduced at this point and has sex with Mrs. Potiphar, then his destiny is going to take a radically different turn, and he's not going to be included in the future destiny of the Jewish people in the same way, right? Or he's going to resist, and he is, and then he'll be part of the family and his legacy will continue and so on. And his father comes to him, this visualization comes to him, and it says, you have a choice. What is the future that you want? And there are, as I mentioned in the notes introducing the source, there are psychological studies that talk about the technique that we can all use today in our own way of visualizing a conversation with our future self, with imagining your future self in front of you and having a conversation saying, where do you want to be? Who is the self that you want to be? And, imagining the future self that we want to be and having a conversation about how we got to be there. What are the traits that we worked on to achieve X, Y, and Z? Or maybe speaking to a future self who didn't achieve everything that we might want to achieve and speaking about how that is. Is that disappointing? How did it work out this way? Is it okay after all? Are there things you might have wanted to do differently? So that's a really powerful practice for us. We can also do it, by the way, through letter writing. We can write letters to our future self and so on, but visualization can be a really helpful part of it. So we can use visualization for communing with the divine, for our own prayer experience, for refining our imagination and helping ourselves create the context for our lives that we want. And we can use it in these very specific ways when we want to work on something very specific. Like let's say there's something very specific I'm working on in my character or in my life, even something more external that requires a lot of training and discipline. I can have a conversation, visualization with my future self or about my future self having achieved this thing that can really help me do it. I'll end with this, just to relate it to how this is used today. Athletes and other high-performing people use visualizations now as standard all the time. It's completely commonplace in the world of sport and other high-achieving fields for people to use that, because people know that in the language of organic intelligence and also the Feldenkrais technique, we organize movement, we organize process before we do it. So before a person moves in a certain way, whether it's running a race really fast or performing a piece of music or whatever it is, there's actually an organizing of what's going to happen in advance that happens inside them before it. And visualizing that can be a very powerful and effective way of helping that process along and making us more likely to succeed in doing it. I'll just pause there, see if anyone wants to jump in for anything. Any thoughts or questions? No? Well, in which case, thank you all very much. You're welcome. And it was lovely to learn with you. And I'll be in touch as always. And feel free to reach out by email or WhatsApp. It's always lovely to hear from you. And I wish you a lovely week, Shavua Tov, and a good month, Chodesh Tov, when the new month comes. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.